For our next segment, we're going to continue with our Difference Maker series. And as I try to do, we try to find new difference makers and people who have stepped up and found a way to make the system better and do their little part to help us deal with this dysfunctional political world we live in. As you know, one of the things we try to do on every show is educate people. And today's difference maker is someone who's stepped up not only to make a difference, but step up in a way to educate people and make them more knowledgeable about the political system. I think that's one of the most important things we can be doing. Our guest is Cathy Stewart. She is the founder and curator of an organization called Politics4thePeople. And among other things, which we're going to talk about today, she has developed a very interesting format for a book club that will get people active in politics and educated in politics. For those of you that saw a couple prior shows of mine, we had a very good interview with Ira Shapiro, who wrote The Last Great Senate. And as you know, on my Third Party 101 website, I always include book reviews. And one of the homework assignments on the show we did with Ira was to have everybody find a good political book to read. And maybe after today's show, you'll also want to sign up for Cathy's book club, so you'll be steadily reading good political books. So, Cathy, welcome to the show.
Steve, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So I'm in Colorado today, and you're in New York City.
Yes, it's about 27 degrees here. What's the temperature there?
Well, actually, the sad part is, and even though this show will probably run in March, it's February right now. We're warmer than you, and you are snowier than us. So something's wrong. I don't know what happened.
Definitely,
yeah.
Definitely.
So tell us a little bit about Politics for the People. How did you get started, and how does your organization work?
Sure. I founded Politics for the People back in 2002, originally here in New York City as an in-person educational series for independent voters and activists in New York. I work with independentvoting.org, the largest national organization of independents, and also in New York City with the New York City Independence Party clubs. We were actually a third party in New York City. And a lot of my work is in developing and training new activists. And what I was beginning to realize is that for many independents, and I think this isn't true more broadly speaking, given the lack of civic dialogue and civic education as we're going through the school system these days. But politics is very intimidating. It's like behind closed doors. How do things really work? And in addition, what I began to recognize is that we don't have a very good understanding of history, how history comes to be, who the shakers and movers are of history. So I wanted to develop a series that allowed us to look at history and politics from an independent point of view, from a nonpartisan point of view, that at the same time created an environment where independents could find their voice and gain confidence and, as I like to say, political literacy with the terminology and the terrain that is American politics and history. So I began with forums throughout the 5 boroughs. Then the demand grew and people asked me to travel around the state and the Northeast. And I realized, I really wanted to find a way to bring this national. And that's where the idea for a book club came along. I'm an avid reader, grew up reading books and loving the worlds that could be open to you through both fiction and nonfiction. So in 2011, we created the Politics for the People book club and blog. As you probably know, somewhere on the order of 4 million Americans belong to a book club. So we're tapping into something that Americans obviously have a hunger for and an interest in. And I think what's very unique is that our book club combines 3 elements. It combines reading a book together with a network of people, having a blog that's curated that includes comments from our readers and members across the country with videos, historical background pieces, critical reviews of the books, and then each selection culminates in a conference call with the author, where we get a chance to create a conversation together.
Well, I want to talk about the book club. But before we get there, I'm intrigued by the fact that somewhere around 2002, you decided we had to do deal with this political literacy problem, not literacy, yeah, political literacy.
Right.
And what were you seeing at the time? What were you seeing that was telling you you needed to step up to educate people and how the system works and give them historical perspective? Was there something in particular that was going on, or it was a culmination of a kind of a career you developed and you just had to step in at that point?
Well, that's actually a really good question, Steve. And I think that it was I would point to two things that were happening. One is that in 2001 in New York City, the Independence Party partnered with Mayor Michael Bloomberg. And Mike Bloomberg, as you know, was a major business leader and a philanthropist who decided to run for mayor in New York City. He was a Democrat who we registered as a Republican because he recognized that the Democratic Party primary was a very closed, in-house kind of setting where he wasn't going to get heard. And then he reached out to the Independence Party because in New York, we're one of 7 states where you actually can appear as a candidate on more than one line on the ballot. And we have a ballot line, and there's close to 2 million independents in New York City. And we partnered with the mayor, and the basis of our partnership was a shared commitment to structural political reforms that would put more power and decision making in the hands of the voters. And our flagship reform in New York City was top 2 nonpartisan elections, because in New York City, the primaries are definitive in 95% of all elections in New York City. So if you can't vote in those primaries, you're not a decision maker in who your elected officials are. You pay the taxes that pay for those primaries, but you can't vote in them. So Mayor Bloomberg agreed with us. He said to us, well, this is a no-brainer. And that was the basis of our coming together, was a commitment to running his administration in a nonpartisan way and fighting for nonpartisan municipal elections. And he won, and his margin of victory was on the Independence Party line. And in my work, I ran the field operation, reaching out to independents. What I was seeing every day is that independents are Americans who are making a statement by becoming independent. They're saying, we've lost confidence in these 2 major parties. They don't represent me. I don't want to be in that box. I want to think for myself. I don't fit neatly in any one ideological category. I don't believe in ideology, but mainly they're saying they've lost confidence. But part of how our election process is structured is with a whole plethora of laws and rules and regulations written by the Democrats and Republicans to keep the system pretty closed. So I wanted to create environments where independents could grapple with what's going on in our democracy. What are the rules? How did we get here? What's the history of the fight to open up the democratic process? And also, I wanted to create environments where independents could feel more confident speaking out and being heard. I think that often people find politics intimidating. So it was kind of a combination of that happening in New York City. So wanting to give people environments to do that, and also to engage speakers in conversing with independents. And also the growing trend in the country of Americans becoming independent. At that point, it was about 37, 38%. It's now 42% of Americans who now self-identify as independent.
So did you find out that these independent voters had kind of a thirst for knowledge and they wanted to understand the system better? Or is that part of what was driving you?
Yes, and that people wanted to learn history and go back and rethink the storyline of how political parties formed. Go back and look at what are the revolutionary roots of our democracy. What were the tensions in the founding of our country? So, for example, some of the early Politics for the People's courses that I taught before we did more with books and current authors was looking at the history of the founding fathers and the history of our founding documents, both both the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and the tensions within the founding fathers around the issue of political parties. They aren't in those founding documents. And in fact, George Washington and John Adams were very concerned about political parties playing a negative role as a mediator and a buffer and a wall between the American people and our government. So we did a lot of work to understand that history. So that's some of what we did in the early part of our building the Politics for the People brand, if you will.
So at some point you decided that a better way to move your effort along was to create the book club. Now,
exactly.
Now, was part of that so that you could go national, so to speak, and get outside of New York?
Yes, part of it was to make the Politics for the People brand more accessible to a national audience. And also, I'll tell you, it's fun. And I really believe that it gives us a really fascinating way into learning history. So, for example, we've read a number of historical fictions. The book we're reading right now, our current selection, is a marvelous book. It's called I Am Abraham, a novel of Lincoln and the Civil War. It's written by Jerome Sharon. He's a very well-established novelist. He's written more than 30 novels. This book is told in the first person. He is imagining President Lincoln's internal life and thinking. And so it's very fascinating. It challenges the way we think about Lincoln the icon and brings you into the history of who Lincoln was as a person who grew up very, very poor, who had to fight to learn to read.
So that's a good question. You said part of your emphasis was on the founding fathers and the development of the country. Obviously, you're picking out great figures in history like Lincoln and trying to get in Lincoln's head through this new book. How do you decide what books you're going to read? Do you have a group that you lean on, or are you the sole arbiter? How do you decide what books you're going to read?
Great question. The books that end up in the Politics for the People lineup come from very diverse ways. So, for example, we read and had as our guest Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote The Warmth of Other Suns, which is a fabulous look at the Great Migration. Just a wonderful, wonderful book. And that was recommended to me by a Politics for the People member. The current selection came to us from one of our other authors, Alex Myers, whose first novel, which just came out last year, is called Revolutionary. And it's a book, again, historical fiction that reimagines the life of Deborah Sampson, who is a Massachusetts woman who snuck into the Revolutionary Army pretending to be a man and served for over a year. It's a wonderful book, and Alex actually recommended Jerome to us. So it's a combination of recommendations. I am always looking for new selections and broad selections. So we've read books about civil rights. We've read books about the two-party system. One of the books we read, we could not have this author on because he's deceased, unfortunately, but he's one of my favorite political analysts, is a gentleman named Walter Karp, who wrote a book called Indispensable Enemies, which we read to kick off the 2014 season. And this book looks at the complicity between the Democratic and Republican parties in how they have structured everything from lobbying rules to the caucus system to how elections are conducted to maintain their bipartisan control. That they'd rather have non-competitive districts than truly competitive districts for everybody. And so it's a fascinating read. So it really ranges.
I think I'm going to have to take a look at that book myself. It sounds like a microcosm of my television show in one book.
Yes, you might really enjoy it. I really think you would.
So talk a little bit about the format of the book club, because I'd like my listeners, my viewers, to get not only excited about your idea, but I want them to join your club. So let's say you pick a book, or the book right now. How do you let people know about it, and then how do they get involved? How do you have the discussion? I know you have the blog.
Right.
Talk about how people get involved.
Okay, so what we do is the book club is open to anybody who considers themselves independent-minded. Many people find us from word of mouth. We also do an email broadcast, and of course I blog, and I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter, that announces each selection. And we email to Independent Voting's Network, the Independence Party's network. We get out to about 11,000 people in our email promotions.
11,000 people. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then the book club, to join it, you go to the blog and you literally sign up to receive our posts. And what we do is once a selection has begun, the blog follows our reading process. So I might start out with some interviews of that author, a video clip, an NPR show, so that we get to know the book. I might ask, I have one of my members is a historian who teaches at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. And often I will ask Dr. Ali to write a background piece about the area, the time that we're reading about. And then I ask our members to write me posts and tell me what they're thinking. What questions is the book raising? What are they finding interesting? What do they want to know more about? So the blog becomes a little bit of a clearinghouse and a crossroads as we're reading. It also, I think that one thing I love about the book club is that many of our members they don't consider themselves to be readers. They consider themselves to be independents who want to learn more, and so they're learning how to read a novel, a political book for the first time, and so the blog is very, very helpful in that regard. And so so the blog goes on, and we read a book over a 4 to 6 week period. So also you have lots of time to read it. Some of our book club members have held readings in their home where they get together and read out loud or talk about the book. So there's all kinds of ancillary activities that take place. And then we have our conference call, which runs for an hour on a Sunday evening, where I bring the author onto the call. I introduce the call and I ask a couple of opening questions to kind of set the stage. And then we go to our participants, and any member can call in, and we'll take as many questions as we can over the course of an hour. And what we've established, the feedback that I get from our authors is very, very good. They talk about the level of dialogue. They are surprised that the P4P audience is asking more depth questions. And I think that's because we've spent 6 weeks together diving into the book. Well, and looking at it from different angles.
Yeah, I looked at the blog, of course, to prepare for this interview, and I thought some of the stuff that was written was really well done. It's not your typical blog where someone's writing 2 or 3 sentences. These people were writing almost mini essays and really expressing some very interesting thoughts about their takeaways from the book. So I thought that was very good.
Yes, yes. And of course, what's fun is that our authors will often go in and read the blog. So then they come onto the call kind of with a sense of some of the issues that we're interested in exploring together. Yeah, well, thank you. That's good to hear.
So one suggestion I'm thinking of, you know, you and I are Skyping today, and I know you said you haven't done a lot with Skype. You may want to do literally what I'm doing and do a Skype interview with the author somewhere in your process and post that interview on the blog. I don't know if that makes sense to you. That's my idea for the day.
I think that's a great idea. I do. I think that might be a really nice next step. Yeah, thank you for that, Steve. I'll really think about that.
So, again, I want my viewers, my listeners, and we'll have this on the website. I want anybody seeing this to know how to get active. Let's tell them again, please, how to get active on this site, how to participate, and how to avoid their political illiteracy or whatever.
Okay, so people can go to www.politics4thepeople.wordpress.com and take a look at the blog, and you'll see on the right-hand side there's a place to enter your email and sign up to receive the blog. And it's as simple as that. And just to say, our next selection is a gem. I'm very, very excited about this. Dr. Eric Foner, who's a major American historian, has written a new book. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner, and his new book is called Gateway to Freedom, and the subtitle is The Hidden History of the Underground Railroad. And he will be with us on April 19th at 7 o'clock. That's Eastern time. It's a Sunday evening. We try to do the calls on Sundays to facilitate a nationwide audience calling in. So we'll kick that book off on February 20th.
Oh, I see.
We'll read it for over a month and a half. So there's lots of time to sign up. I know that this is going to air in the future.
Probably right in
not
the
right
middle.
now.
Probably right in the middle, yes.
Okay, good. So that's perfect. So people can join in. The other thing I tell folks, because all of us are so busy, and so over the course of the year, the Politics for the People book club will do 4 to 5 selections. Even if you can't read the book or you only got so far in the book, you can still come onto the call and enjoy the rich dialogue with the author. You'll still get a lot out of that. And that's the other thing I like about the book club is it gives people many layers of ways to participate that work with their lives, and all of which help us develop our understanding of who makes history
Well, Cathy, I have
and
to tell
who
you,
gets to decide what history is.
one thing I find with my show is time always flies when I'm having fun, and we're getting to the end of the interview here. I want to tell you, your enthusiasm is beyond infectious. So
Thank
I
you.
can't imagine anybody can watch this segment and not want to look at Politics for the People and at least take a run at one of your books. So hopefully we'll get that done for you. And then, because time did fly today, we didn't really get to talk about independent voting, some of the other things you do. I'm coming out to your conference in March, and my intention is to, understand your organization better and maybe do a sequence on some future shows about some of these other topics. So thank you for your time today, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks so much, Steve. It was really a pleasure to speak with you, and I'll meet you in a month
Perfect.
in New York.
Great, thank you.
Bye-bye.